It happened at 2:34 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon in March, the moment Maxine Waters realized she'd made a catastrophic mistake. FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino stood at an easel holding up a large satellite photograph. On the screen behind him, two images displayed side by side. On the left, a $6 million mansion with manicured lawns, palm trees swaying gently, security gates gleaming in the California sun. On the right, rows of homeless tents stretching for blocks in South Los Angeles. Blue tarps, shopping carts, people living on concrete. Waters was leaning forward in her chair, mouth open, trying to call point of order, but the words weren't coming out. Her hand was raised, but frozen in midair. Around them, the House Judiciary Committee hearing room had gone completely silent. Not the polite silence of respectful attention, the stunned collective gasp silence of watching a train wreck happen in real time. 52 million people were watching live across every network. Twitter was on fire. Reddit was melting down. Cable news split screens showed the mansion and the tents over and over and over. Because everyone in that room, everyone watching at home, could see what was written on Maxine Waters' face. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was supposed to be her hearing, her moment to grill a Trump-appointed FBI official on national television, her chance to reclaim her time and become a hero to the resistance once again. Instead, she was the one being investigated in real time, with receipts, with photographs, with property records and bank statements and campaign finance reports spread across screens for the entire world to see. But to understand how we got here, to this moment, where a 32-year congressional veteran's career was imploding on live television, we need to rewind. Not far, just 45 minutes. Back to when Maxine Waters still thought she was in control. Chairman Jim Jordan banged the gavel 3 times. The sound echoed through the ornate chamber, bouncing off the high ceilings and marble columns. This hearing of the House Judiciary Committee is now in session. His voice was firm, businesslike. He'd done this 1,000 times before. We're here today to examine allegations of FBI overreach and concerns about political weaponization of federal law enforcement. We have Deputy Director Dan Bongino here to address questions from both sides of the aisle. He looked down at Bongino, seated alone at the witness table. No team of lawyers flanking him, no PR handlers whispering in his ear, no prepared statements stacked in front of him. Just Bongino, a thick manila folder, and a bottle of water. Deputy Director Bongino, thank you for appearing today. Bongino leaned forward and adjusted his microphone. His voice had that unmistakable edge to it. Queens, New York. The accent of someone who'd grown up working class and never bothered to sand it down or polish it away for the sake of sounding more professional. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to answer whatever questions the committee has. Before Jordan could recognize anyone else, before he could even finish his opening remarks, Maxine Waters leaned hard into her microphone. She was dressed in a bold red suit, perfectly tailored, her signature style. 75 years old, and still one of the loudest, most theatrical voices in Congress. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to reclaim my time before I even start, because I know this witness is going to try to filibuster like every other Trump appointee who sat in that chair. Laughter erupted from the Democrat side of the room. A few groans from the Republican side. Some of the younger staffers in the back were grinning. This was vintage Maxine, aggressive, confrontational, playing directly to the cameras. This was what her supporters loved about her. Jordan sighed, not even trying to hide his exasperation. The gentlewoman from California is recognized for 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Waters put on her reading glasses with a flourish. She looked down at her prepared notes, then directly at Bongino. Her eyes were sharp behind those glasses. Predatory. Deputy Director Bongino, let's be very clear about who you are and what you represent. She paused for effect, letting the cameras catch her expression. You are a former radio host, a former Fox News contributor, a Trump sycophant who has absolutely no business being in a position of authority at the FBI. Another pause. She was working the room now, voice rising. You have spent the last several years attacking progressive members of Congress, attacking the Black Lives Matter movement, attacking anyone who dares to speak truth to this corrupt administration. And now, somehow, you sit in one of the most powerful positions in federal law enforcement. She leaned forward, finger pointing. So let me ask you directly, and I want a yes or no answer. Has the FBI under your watch investigated any Black Lives Matter activists in California? Yes or no? Bongino didn't flinch. He'd been a Secret Service agent for years. He'd stood post protecting presidents. He'd been trained to keep his composure under pressure, under threat, under chaos. A congressional hearing was nothing. Congresswoman Waters, we've investigated individuals suspected of committing federal crimes. Some of those individuals may have expressed support for various movements or causes, but we don't investigate ideologies or First Amendment protected activities. We investigate crimes. That's not what I asked. Waters' voice jumped an octave. Yes or no? Have you investigated Black Lives Matter activists? If you want yes or no answers, I can give them to you, but they won't give you the full picture of what we actually do. Bongino's voice was calm, steady, not defensive. For example, yes, we investigated a self-described BLM organizer in Oakland who allegedly embezzled $4.2 million from a charitable foundation that was supposed to help families affected by police violence. Should we have ignored that crime because of his stated political beliefs? Should we have let him keep stealing from grieving families because he claimed to be an activist? Waters waved her hand dismissively, cutting through the air like she was swatting away an annoying fly. You're deflecting. That's what you people always do. Deflect, deflect, deflect. Let's talk about your background. You worked for the Trump campaign. You made money spreading right-wing propaganda on Fox News and your podcast. How can you possibly claim to be nonpartisan when you've spent years being a mouthpiece for Trump? This was her standard playbook, the strategy that had worked for her dozens of times before. Attack credibility. Make it personal. Make it about Trump. Make it about race. Make it about power dynamics. Get the witness defensive. Get them emotional. Get them off balance. She'd done it to bank CEOs, to Trump administration officials, to Republican committee members. It always worked. The person would get flustered, would start defending themselves, would look guilty even if they weren't. But she'd never done it to Dan Bongino. Congresswoman, you're absolutely right about some of that. His answer caught her off guard. She'd expected denial, expected defensiveness. I was vocal during the 2016 campaign. I worked in media. I had opinions, strong opinions. Still do, actually. He paused, then leaned forward slightly. But let me ask you something. How long have you represented California's 43rd Congressional District? Waters narrowed her eyes. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. She was asking the questions, not him. 32 years. What does that have to do with anything? 32 years. That's a long time to represent a community. Bongino's voice was still calm. Too calm. Like he was working towards something. And in those 32 years, how many days per year would you estimate you've actually spent in that district living there? I mean, not doing campaign stops or press conferences or photo ops, actually living in the community you represent, sleeping there, shopping there, seeing what your constituents see every single day. The room got very quiet. Journalists stopped typing. Committee members looked up from their phones. Even the staffers in the back stopped whispering to each other. Waters stared at him. She saw the trap opening in front of her, saw exactly where this was going. But it was too late. She'd already opened this door by attacking his credibility. And now he was walking right through it. I don't have to answer your questions. You're the witness here, not me. You're absolutely right, Congresswoman. 100% correct. Bongino nodded like he was conceding the point. But you asked about my credibility, my background, my fitness for this job. You questioned whether I should be allowed to hold this position. So I thought it was fair, in the interest of transparency, to examine your credibility and your fitness for your position as well. Jim Jordan leaned into his microphone, and there was the slightest hint of a smile on his face. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to yield the remainder of my time to Deputy Director Bongino, so he can fully respond to the ranking member's questions about his qualifications and background. Without objection. Bongino stood up slowly, deliberately. He walked over to an easel that had been set up near the witness table. It had several large poster boards stacked on it, all covered with a white cloth so nobody could see what was underneath. Congresswoman Waters, you represent California's 43rd District. You've represented it for 32 years. So, let me show the committee, and let me show the American people watching at home, what that district actually looks like. He pulled off the first cover with a smooth motion. A large map of California's 43rd Congressional District appeared. South Los Angeles, Watts, Inglewood, parts of South Central. The boundaries were marked clearly in red, and overlaid on top of the map were statistics, numbers highlighted in bold. Median household income, $42,000, poverty rate, 23%, homeless population, 8,400 people, violent crime rate, 847 incidents per 100,000 residents. This is your district, Congresswoman. These are the people you've represented for 32 years. Working-class families, people struggling to make ends meet. A lot of them living paycheck to paycheck. One emergency away from losing everything. He let that information sit for a moment. Let the cameras zoom in on the numbers. Let America see exactly what CA-43 looked like. Then he reached over and pulled off the second cover. An address appeared in large letters. Property records. Zillow estimates. Tax assessments. All official documents. All public records. 6081 2nd Avenue, Los Angeles, California, 943. Property value, $6.1 million. Bedrooms, 6. Bathrooms, 7. Square footage, 6,200 annual property tax, $52,000. And then, in bold red letters at the bottom, impossible to miss. Not in Congressional District 43. The room erupted. Journalists typing frantically, fingers flying across keyboards. Republicans leaning forward in their seats, suddenly very interested. Democrats looking at each other with confusion and growing concern. Camera shutters clicking like machine guns. Producers in control rooms frantically calling for tighter shots for those keeping track at home. Bongino continued, his voice cutting through the noise like a knife. Congresswoman Maxine Waters has represented one of the poorest districts in Los Angeles for 32 years, but she doesn't actually live there. She doesn't wake up there in the morning. She doesn't see what her constituents see. She lives in a $6 million mansion in Hancock Park, which, just for clarity, is in California's 37th district. That's Karen Bass's district, not hers. Waters shot to her feet. Her voice was shaking now, a mixture of rage and panic. This is character assassination. This is a smear campaign. Mr. Chairman, I demand that this line of questioning be shut down immediately. Character assassination. Bongino's voice rose for the first time. Not shouting, but sharp, cutting, the Queen's accent getting thicker. Congresswoman, these are public records. Your own financial disclosures that you filed with the House Ethics Committee. Property tax documents from Los Angeles County. This is your address. You filed these papers. You signed these forms. I'm not making anything up. I'm just showing the American people what you've been trying to hide. He walked back to his folder on the witness table, pulled out another document. This one was thicker, more pages. And let's talk about how a woman who's been on a government salary her entire adult life, who's never run a business or had a private sector job, managed to accumulate a net worth estimated between $3 and $6 million. Let's talk about your husband, Sidney Williams, and his very interesting involvement with One United Bank. Waters's face went pale. Actually pale. The color drained out of her cheeks like someone had pulled a plug. The One United scandal. She thought that was buried, dead and gone. Ancient history. The Ethics Committee had investigated. It took 3 years. They cleared her. Technically, her grandson took the fall. It was over. Finished. She'd moved on. But Bongino was digging it back up. And from the look on his face, from the thickness of that folder, he had new information. Things that hadn't come out in the original investigation. In 2008, during the financial crisis, One United Bank was failing. Your husband sat on the board of directors, and somehow, you managed to arrange a meeting between Treasury Department officials and One United executives. Bongino walked back to the easel, put up a new poster board. This one was a timeline, dates and events laid out in chronological order. Let me walk everyone through this step by step, because the timing here is really fascinating. He pointed to the first date. September 2008. Your husband, Sidney Williams, holds $250,000 in One United Bank stock. The bank is failing. Stock price is collapsing. He's about to lose everything. September 9th. Your office arranges an emergency meeting between Treasury officials and One United executives. Very unusual. Treasury was overwhelmed during the crisis. They weren't taking meetings with random small banks. But somehow, you got them in the room. September 30th. 3 weeks after the meeting you arranged, One United Bank receives $12 million in TARP bailout funds. Funds that were supposed to save banks critical to the national economy. But One United wasn't critical to anything except your husband's portfolio. October 15th. Your husband sells his One United stock. He doesn't get everything back, but the TARP money stopped the free fall. He recovers a significant portion of his investment. Bongino looked up from the timeline. And then, between November 2008 and March 2009, while the rest of America is losing their homes in foreclosure, while your constituents in South LA are being evicted, while unemployment is spiking, you somehow managed to purchase $1.8 million in real estate. Multiple properties, all cash purchases or minimal financing. He turned to face her directly. Congresswoman, can you explain how, during the worst recession in 80 years, while your constituents were losing everything, you managed to go on a real estate shopping spree worth almost $2 million? Waters was conferring frantically with her chief of staff. A young man, couldn't be more than 30, was leaning over, whispering urgently in her ear. Her hands were shaking slightly as she shuffled through papers. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. This was supposed to be about FBI overreach, about targeting progressives, about Trump and authoritarianism. This was not supposed to be about her. That was investigated. Her voice cracked slightly. The House Ethics Committee spent 3 years investigating me, and I was cleared. You were cleared after 3 years of investigation. Yes. But let's talk about what that investigation actually found. Bongino pulled out a printed report. It was thick, dozens of pages. He flipped to a marked section. I'm going to quote directly from the Ethics Committee's final report. Quote, while the committee found that Representative Waters did not violate House rules in her actions related to One United Bank, her chief of staff, who is also her grandson, Mikhail Moore, acted inappropriately in arranging the Treasury Department meeting without proper authorization or disclosure. End quote. He looked up from the report. Your grandson took the fall. How convenient. He acted inappropriately, but you didn't know anything about it, even though it was your husband's money on the line, even though it was your office that set up the meeting, even though you're the one who benefited from the outcome. He put the report down and picked up another document. But here's what I find really interesting, Congresswoman, and this is where it gets into pattern territory rather than isolated incident territory. He put up another poster board. This one showed 3 separate instances laid out side by side. Instance number 1, 2008, One United Bank. Your husband on the board, bank failing. You arrange Treasury meeting, bank gets bailout. You buy real estate. Instance number 2, 2014. You're on the Financial Services Committee. There's a vote on whether to impose stricter oversight requirements on community banks. Your husband has investments in 3 different community banks at the time. You vote against the stricter oversight. The banks avoid costly new regulations. Your financial disclosure the following year shows significant gains in those investments. Instance number 3, 2019. You sponsor a bill providing tax breaks to small financial institutions, community banks specifically. Your husband invests $180,000 in Community Capital Bank 3 months before the bill is introduced. The bill passes. Stock value increases by 40% over the next year. He sells at a profit. Bongino stepped back from the easel. Congresswoman, do you see a pattern here? Because I do. Every single time there's a vote or a decision that affects banks where your family has financial interests, you vote in a way that benefits those interests. Every single time. And every single time your family makes money while your constituents stay poor. A Republican committee member, Matt Gaetz, leaned into his microphone. Deputy Director Bongino, in your professional opinion as a federal law enforcement official with decades of experience investigating public corruption, should these financial patterns warrant further investigation? There was a long pause. The room was completely silent. Every camera in the chamber zoomed in on Bongino's face, then cut to Waters. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past hour. The theatrical confidence from the opening statement was completely gone. Congressman, I can't speak to any specific ongoing investigations. That would be inappropriate and potentially illegal. But I can say this in general terms. Bongino chose his words very carefully. If any private citizen, any ordinary American, showed these same patterns, if they were a public official with financial oversight authority over an industry, and their family members had repeated investments in that industry, and there was unexplained wealth accumulation that didn't match their disclosed income, and there were consistent votes and actions that benefited those family interests, then yes, Under normal circumstances, that would warrant a closer look from law enforcement. Waters stood up. Her voice was barely controlled now, shaking with either rage or fear or both. I have been in Congress for 32 years. I have been investigated by the Ethics Committee. I have been cleared. This is nothing but a smear campaign orchestrated by a Trump operative who has no business wearing an FBI badge. Congresswoman, Bongino's voice cut through her, shouting like a scalpel. Not loud, not aggressive, just firm, authoritative. The voice of someone who'd spent years testifying in court and knew how to command a room. I'm not a Trump operative. I don't work for Trump. I work for the American people. I work for the Constitution. And I investigate corruption wherever I find it. Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter to me. If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe that tells us something worth examining. He started packing up his folder like he was preparing to leave. You called this hearing to impeach FBI leadership, to expose us as political hacks, to show the country that we were targeting progressive activists and black leaders for their beliefs. You wanted transparency. You demanded it. He looked directly at her. Congratulations, Congresswoman. You got transparency, just not the kind you were expecting. But Bongino wasn't actually done. He sat back down and pulled out his iPad, connected it to the room's display system with a cable one of the technicians handed him. Congresswoman, you said I don't know anything about your district. You said I've never been there. You said I don't know your people. The screen lit up with video footage. High definition, clearly professional quality. Drone shots sweeping over neighborhoods. Homeless encampments stretching for entire blocks. Dozens of tents. Hundreds of people living on sidewalks. Shopping carts filled with possessions. Blue tarps stretched over makeshift shelters. Trash piling up on street corners because sanitation couldn't keep up. Abandoned buildings with broken windows and graffiti covering every surface. Boarded up storefronts. Police signs that looked like they'd been there for years. Chain-link fences around vacant lots filled with weeds. Crime scene tape fluttering in the breeze, yellow and black. Cordoning off areas where violence had occurred the night before. Then, a hard cut. A jarring transition to a completely different world. Waters' mansion. Pristine. Perfect. Manicured lawn so green it almost looked artificial. Palm trees swaying gently. Security gates gleaming in the sunlight. A gardener in a uniform trimming hedges into perfect geometric shapes. A luxury car in the driveway. Another car visible in the open garage. Back and forth the footage went. The poverty and the wealth. The struggle and the luxury. The district she represented and the life she actually lived. The contrast was devastating. Brutal. Undeniable. This footage is from 3 weeks ago. Bongino's voice narrated over the images. I hired a private investigation firm with my own money. Not FBI resources, not taxpayer dollars, my own personal money, to document current conditions in your district. I wanted to see for myself what the people you represent actually deal with every single day. The video continued, street level now. Handheld camera walking through neighborhoods. The footage was steady but intimate. You could see everything, every detail, every piece of broken pavement, every person sleeping in a doorway, every shuttered business. They spent 2 weeks in California's 43rd District, walking every major street, talking to residents, documenting conditions. You want to know what they found? The statistics appeared on screen as he read them out loud. 47 homeless encampments. Large enough to house more than 20 people each. Over 3,200 people living on the streets with no shelter at all. 340 abandoned or severely deteriorated buildings. Average police response time of 28 minutes for emergency calls. 14 grocery stores that have closed in the past 5 years, creating food deserts where people can't buy fresh produce within walking distance. 23 new liquor stores opened in that same time period. He paused the video on a particularly stark image. A family, 2 adults and 3 children, living in a tent under an overpass. Their possessions in garbage bags, a small camping stove for cooking. Children doing homework by flashlight. And here's my favorite part. My investigators surveyed 200 random residents of your district. Not a scientific poll, just conversations with people on the street, in parks, outside grocery stores. Asked them one simple question. When was the last time you saw Congresswoman Waters in person? Not at a staged event or a press conference or a campaign rally. Just around, in the community, at the grocery store, at church, walking down the street. The results appeared on the screen in large numbers. Never seen her, 78%. Seen once in the past year, 15%. Seen multiple times, 7%. 78% of your constituents have never seen you in their neighborhood. Not once in 32 years. You represent them. You collect their votes, you use their struggles in your speeches, but you don't live with them. You don't shop where they shop. You don't see what they see every single day. You collect their votes and their campaign donations, and then you go back to your $6 million mansion in someone else's district. Waters made one last attempt to take control. Her voice was shaking now, but she was committed to this strategy. It was all she had left. This is a setup. You're abusing your position at the FBI to attack a sitting member of Congress. This is harassment. This is intimidation. And let's be very clear about what this really is. This is racism. You're targeting me because I'm a strong black woman who refuses to be silenced. The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Every person in that chamber, every person watching at home, knew that this was the moment, the nuclear option, the accusation that could end careers and destroy reputations. Bongino stood up very slowly. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried through the entire room with perfect clarity. Don't you dare! Everyone leaned forward. Republicans, Democrats, journalists, staffers, everyone. Don't you dare play that card with me, Congresswoman. His voice was rising now, the Queen's accent getting thicker, the working-class edge sharpening into something harder. I grew up with nothing. My parents were working class. We struggled. I worked my way through college, taking night classes while working full-time. I became a cop in New York City. I became a Secret Service agent. I've protected presidents of both parties with my life. I've investigated corruption in both parties. I've gone after white politicians, black politicians, Latino politicians, Asian politicians. I don't give a damn about your race or your gender or your party affiliation. He was almost shouting now, but it was controlled, focused like a laser cutting through metal. What I care about, what I actually give a damn about, is that your constituents, who are black, who are brown, who are immigrants, who are struggling every single day just to survive, deserve better than a representative who gets rich while they get poorer. So don't you dare hide behind identity politics and cry racism when you've been robbing your community blind for 3 decades. The room exploded into complete pandemonium. Republicans on their feet, applauding. Some of them actually cheering. Democrats screaming for order, calling for Bongino to be removed from the chamber. Waters shouting into her microphone, but her voice couldn't be heard over the chaos. Chairman Jordan banging the gavel over and over, the sound lost in the noise. And through it all, Dan Bongino stood there, arms crossed, staring directly at Maxine Waters. Not gloating, not celebrating, just watching, waiting. The chaos went on for nearly 5 minutes. Eventually, slowly, the room quieted down enough for Jordan to speak. This hearing is in recess for 30 minutes. We will reconvene to continue questioning at 3:15 p.m. But Waters was already gone. She'd pushed through her staffers and aides, almost running toward the exit. No statement to the press waiting in the hallway. No defiant pose for the cameras. No reclaiming her time. Just a desperate sprint to get out of that room, away from those cameras, away from the evidence and the accusations and the truth laid bare for everyone to see. Bongino watched her go. Then he calmly gathered his materials, put them back in his folder, and walked out the side exit reserved for witnesses. He ignored the reporters shouting questions at him, didn't stop, didn't engage. One of his aides caught up with him in the hallway. "Sir, that was intense." Bongino shrugged, kept walking. "She asked for it, literally. She called the hearing. She subpoenaed me. She attacked my credibility. I just returned fire with facts. The media is going to go absolutely crazy with this. Let them." He pushed through a security door into a restricted corridor. Sometimes people need to see what actual corruption looks like. Not the theoretical kind that cable news talks about. The real kind. The kind where politicians get rich while their voters stay poor. The kind where someone claims to fight for the people while living like royalty. That's the kind of corruption that actually matters. The next 2 hours were a media supernova unlike anything Washington had seen in years. Within 10 minutes of the hearing going into recess, clips were everywhere. Every platform, every network. Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. The algorithms picked them up instantly. The engagement was off the charts. The Poverty Pimp line hit 40 million views in the first 3 hours. People watched it over and over, shared it, quoted it, argued about it. The clip of Bongino calling Waters out while she tried to hide behind racism accusations got 60 million views by evening, but it was the split screen that really went nuclear. Someone, probably a staffer or a journalist in the room, had grabbed the footage of Waters' mansion next to the homeless encampments, put them side by side, added text at the bottom in bold white letters, 32 years of representation. That image was everywhere. It showed up on news broadcasts, in newspaper op-eds, on protest signs, on T-shirts. It became the visual representation of everything wrong with career politicians who claim to fight for the poor while living in luxury. The hashtags told the story. Maxine Exposed trended #1 worldwide within an hour. And Poverty Pimp hit #3, which was controversial but undeniable in its spread. Anti-Maxine, which had been her supporters' affectionate nickname, became a punchline. CNN tried their best to spin it in her favor. Their initial coverage focused on Bongino's tone and language. FBI official uses inflammatory rhetoric in heated exchange with senior congresswoman. They brought on analysts who talked about the inappropriate nature of personal attacks during congressional testimony. But even they were struggling. Even the most sympathetic hosts couldn't ignore the substance of what had been revealed. One CNN analyst, brought on specifically to defend Waters, started his segment strong. The deputy director's comments were wildly inappropriate and potentially racist. But then, the anchor showed him the property records, the timeline of the One United scandal, the statistics from Waters' district, and the analyst paused, looked at the documents, and said quietly, "Although some of these financial questions are legitimate and probably should be examined." That clip of him admitting that went viral too. Fox News went into full celebration mode. They cleared their entire evening lineup to cover nothing but the hearing. Bongino destroys career race baiter. The total exposure of Maxine Waters. How one FBI official revealed 30 years of corruption in 30 minutes. They played the clips on loop, brought on guest after guest to analyze every moment, every document, every revelation. MSNBC was stuck in an impossible position. Their audience loved Maxine Waters. She was a hero to the resistance, a fighter, a voice for the voiceless. But the evidence was undeniable. The mansion was real. The campaign payments to her daughter were real. The banking votes were real. The timeline was real. They tried to thread the needle. While Deputy Director Bongino's language was concerning and some of his attacks were personal, the questions he raised about Congresswoman Waters' finances and potential conflicts of interest deserve serious examination and transparent answers. But the real damage wasn't happening on cable news. It was happening at street level in South Los Angeles, in Watts, in Inglewood, in the very communities that Maxine Waters had represented for 32 years. Local social media exploded. Community Facebook groups, neighborhood WhatsApp chats, Twitter accounts run by activists and organizers who'd spent years defending Waters against Republican attacks. Now, they were asking questions, hard questions. "Yo, I've been living in South Central 40 years. Never seen Maxine except on TV. Not once. She really living in a $6 million house? Where the hell she gets $6 million? My daughter been trying to get help from her office about Section 8 for 2 years. Can't even get a call back. But she got time to pay her own daughter $1 million? One United Bank, I remember that. They took TARP money and gave their executives bonuses. Maxine helped them get that money? Her husband was on the board? What the hell?" The anger was real, raw. These weren't Republicans attacking from the outside. These were her constituents, her voters, people who'd supported her for decades. And they felt betrayed. By 6:00 p.m. that evening, less than 4 hours after the hearing ended, 3 different community organizers in CA 43 had posted on social media that they were exploring options for challenging Waters in the primary. By 8:00 p.m., one of them had officially filed paperwork with the FEC. A 34-year-old community organizer named Marcus Williams grew up in Watts, still lived there, had never run for office before, but had spent 10 years organizing tenant rights groups and police accountability protests. His announcement statement was simple and devastating. "I loved Maxine Waters for what she represented, for what she used to be, a fighter for our community. But today I saw something that broke my heart. I saw the gap between who she says she is and who she actually is. I saw the mansion, and I saw our streets. I saw the money her family made, and I saw our poverty. I saw 32 years of promises, and I saw our reality. We deserve better. It's time." Within 2 hours of posting that statement, his campaign had raised $80,000. Small dollar donations, $5, $10, $20, from people in the district. From people who'd voted for Waters their entire adult lives and were now ready for change. Waters' office released a statement at 6:15 p.m. It was exactly what you'd expect, exactly what her team had been preparing since the moment the hearing went off the rails. Today's hearing was a politically motivated ambush, designed to silence a strong black woman who has spent her career fighting for justice and equality. Deputy Director Bongino's attacks were baseless, racist, and part of a broader pattern of weaponizing federal law enforcement against progressive leaders who dare to speak truth to power. I will not be intimidated. I will not be silenced. I will continue to fight for my constituents and for progressive values across this country. But it landed completely flat, because Bongino hadn't attacked her race. He'd attacked her record, her finances, her properties, her votes, her family's banking connections, her campaign payments, her absence from her own district. All of it documented, all of it verifiable, all of it public record. You couldn't dismiss public records as racism. Even her usual defenders were notably quiet. The Congressional Black Caucus issued a carefully worded statement about due process and presumption of innocence, but conspicuously didn't mention Waters by name or defend her actions. The Progressive Caucus tweeted once about defending all members against political attacks without specifically referencing her. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who'd been part of the squad with Waters, tweeted, "Due process matters for everyone. All members deserve fair treatment." That was it. No defense of Waters personally. No condemnation of Bongino, just a generic statement about process. Rashida Tlaib retweeted AOC and added, "Standing with all who face political persecution." Generic, safe, non-committal, carefully worded to sound supportive without actually defending anything Waters had done. Nobody wanted to get too close to this particular fire, because the evidence was too strong. The optics were too bad. The contrast between the mansion and the tent cities was too stark. The numbers didn't lie, and most importantly, the constituents were angry. Really angry. The kind of anger that loses elections. The next 72 hours saw the complete unraveling of Maxine Waters' political standing. Day 2 started with the Los Angeles Times dropping a bombshell. They'd been working on an investigation for months, apparently, but the hearing had accelerated their timeline. The headline was brutal. The Waters Empire: How One Family Built Millions on Public Service. 23 pages in the print edition. They detailed every property purchase Waters had made over 30 years, every payment to family members documented in FEC filings, every committee vote that had aligned with her family's financial interests, every real estate transaction that coincided with convenient timing. They interviewed former staffers who spoke on condition of anonymity. She barely comes to the district, maybe 4 or 5 times a year outside of election season. The office handles everything. She just shows up for the big events and the cameras. They interviewed constituents, dozens of them. The quotes were damning. "I voted for her since 1991, 32 years. You know how many times I've seen her in person? 0. Not once. She doesn't live here. She doesn't care about us. She just uses us. My block has 3 homeless encampments. The elementary school where my kids go has mold in the bathrooms. Been trying to get help for 3 years. Can't even get her office on the phone. But she's got a $6 million mansion. Where's that money coming from?" She talks about fighting banks and Wall Street, but her husband's on bank boards. Her daughter gets paid by her campaign. Her grandson worked in her office. It's all a family business. We're just the props. The Times also did a comprehensive financial analysis, took her congressional salary, added her husband's documented income from various sources, factored in reasonable investment returns. Even being generous with assumptions, the math didn't work. Her disclosed income couldn't account for her accumulated wealth. Not even close. Either Representative Waters has undisclosed sources of income, or her investment returns have been extraordinarily lucky in ways that coincide suspiciously with her committee votes. or there are financial irregularities that warrant serious investigation, the article concluded. The Washington Post followed up with their own piece. Ethics questions mount for veteran Congresswoman after explosive hearing. They focused more on the procedural and political aspects, the history of the One United investigation, the Ethics Committee's findings, and their limitations. The pattern of family members being paid from campaign funds, which was legal but increasingly controversial, the questions about conflicts of interest on the Financial Services Committee. They interviewed ethics lawyers and campaign finance experts. The consensus was uncomfortable for Waters. Is it illegal to live outside your district? No. Is it illegal to pay family members for campaign work? No. Is it illegal to have investments in industries you regulate? Not necessarily. But taken together, this pattern raises serious questions about judgment, about priorities, and about whether the representative is actually serving her constituents or serving herself. Politico went a different direction. Their piece was titled, "How Maxine Waters Lost Control of Her Own Hearing, a Post-Mortem." They interviewed people who'd been in the room, staffers, committee members, journalists. The narrative that emerged was of a catastrophic political miscalculation. Waters had called the hearing thinking she could score easy points attacking a Trump-appointed FBI official. She'd prepared aggressive questions about political targeting and weaponization. She'd planned to make it about resistance and fighting authoritarianism. She thought she had the high ground. She never anticipated that Bongino would have done his homework, that he would have spent his own money to investigate her district, that he would have compiled her financial records and property holdings, that he would be willing to go on offense instead of playing defense. She brought a narrative to a gunfight, one Republican staffer told Politico. She thought this was going to be about Trump and racism and political targeting. Bongino made it about mansions and bank accounts and homeless people in her district. She had no contingency plan for that. But it was the local coverage that really mattered. The coverage in Los Angeles, in the communities that made up CA 43. Local radio stations, which had always given Waters friendly coverage, started taking calls from angry constituents. The hosts tried to defend her at first, but the callers weren't having it. One exchange on a popular South LA morning show went viral. Host: "Look, I've known Maxine for 20 years. She's always fought for us." Caller: "Fought for us? Bruh, she don't even live here. She got a mansion in Hancock Park. When's the last time she was at the community center? When's the last time she went to Crenshaw? She only come around when she need votes." Host: "She's been representing us since 1991. Caller: "Exactly. 32 years. And what's changed? We still poor. Schools still bad. Streets still messed up. But she got $6 million. Her daughter got $1 million? Where's our money? Where's our help? She been using us." The host tried to respond, but the caller had touched something. The phone lines lit up. Every caller after that had similar stories, similar anger, similar sense of betrayal. Community newspapers, the small publications that actually circulated in the neighborhoods of CA 43, ran editorials that were remarkably similar in tone. "We've defended Congresswoman Waters for years against Republican attacks. We've voted for her, we've supported her, but we can't ignore what we saw in that hearing. We can't ignore the mansion. We can't ignore the money her family made. We can't ignore that she doesn't live here. We can't ignore 32 years of poverty while she got rich. We deserve answers, real answers, not accusations of racism against everyone who asks questions." By day 3, the House Ethics Committee had announced they were opening a formal preliminary inquiry into Waters' financial disclosures and potential conflicts of interest related to her work on the Financial Services Committee. The announcement was carefully worded. The committee has received multiple complaints regarding potential violations of House ethics rules. Consistent with our procedures, we are opening a preliminary inquiry to determine whether a full investigation is warranted. This is not a finding of wrongdoing. Representative Waters will have full opportunity to respond to any allegations. But everyone in Washington knew what it meant. The Ethics Committee doesn't open inquiries lightly, especially not into senior members, especially not into members of the Congressional Black Caucus, especially not into someone as prominent and politically connected as Maxine Waters. For them to open an inquiry meant they thought there was something there. Something real. Something worth investigating. Republican House leadership, smelling blood in the water, immediately called for Waters to be removed from the Financial Services Committee pending the outcome of the investigation. How can she oversee banks when her own financial dealings with banks are under investigation? How can she regulate an industry her family profits from? The conflict of interest is too obvious to ignore. And then the Democrats did something that sent shockwaves through the political world. They didn't fight it. Speaker Hakeem Jeffries, who'd replaced Nancy Pelosi, issued a carefully calibrated statement that managed to sound supportive while actually hanging Waters out to dry. The Ethics Committee process is important and must be allowed to proceed without interference. In the interest of maintaining public confidence in the integrity of our oversight work, and at Representative Waters' own request, she has agreed to temporarily step back from her ranking member position on the Financial Services Committee until the preliminary inquiry is complete. At her own request, that phrase did a lot of work. It suggested this was her choice, her decision. But everyone knew it was political pressure. Behind closed-doors conversations where leadership made it clear that if she didn't step aside voluntarily, they'd force her out with a floor vote. And that vote would be humiliating because dozens of Democrats would vote with Republicans. Better to step aside voluntarily and preserve some dignity. The vote came anyway. Republicans forced it. They wanted it on record. They wanted Democrats to have to choose. House Resolution 837, removing Maxine Waters from the Committee on Financial Services pending resolution of ethics inquiry. The vote was 298 to 134. 47 Democrats voted yes. 47 members of her own party. Colleagues she'd served with for decades. People who'd called her a friend. They voted to remove her from her committee. That number told the entire story. When that many of your own party votes to sideline you, your career is effectively over. You might keep your seat. You might survive a primary. But you'll never have real power again. You'll never chair a committee. You'll never be ranking member. You'll be a backbencher. A warning to others. The official reason given by Democrats who voted yes was process and propriety. We believe the ethics investigation should proceed without the appearance of conflict. But the real reason was simpler. They were scared. Scared of the optics. Scared of being associated with her. Scared of their own constituents asking them why they were defending someone who lived in a mansion while representing the poor. Politics is about self-preservation first. Loyalty second. And when the two conflict, preservation always wins. Waters watched the vote from her office. She didn't go to the floor, didn't give a speech in her own defense. Her staff released a brief statement. I am deeply disappointed by today's vote. I maintain that I have done nothing wrong and look forward to the Ethics Committee confirming that fact. I will continue to represent my constituents with the same dedication and passion I always have. But even that rang hollow now. The same dedication and passion from a $6 million mansion in someone else's district. 3 weeks after the hearing, I managed to track down one of the community organizers who'd been in the room that day. Her name was Tamika. She'd been an activist in South LA for 15 years. Police reform, tenant rights, community development. She'd defended Waters countless times against Republican attacks. We met at a small cafe in Inglewood. She looked tired, like she'd been carrying something heavy and finally put it down, but her shoulders still hurt. "Were you surprised by what happened in that hearing?" I asked. She stirred her coffee slowly, thinking about the question. Yes and no. Everyone in the community knew about the mansion. We knew she didn't live in the district. We knew about her daughter getting paid from the campaign. But it was like we just accepted it. That's how politics works, right? They all do it. They all have their side deals. They all take care of their families. That's just the game. So, what changed? Seeing it all laid out like that on national television, with the pictures, the numbers, the timeline, the contrast between her mansion and our streets. She took a sip of coffee. It wasn't news to us, but seeing it all together, seeing the exact numbers, seeing how much she made while our schools fell apart, that hit different. That made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "Do you think she'll survive this politically?" Tamika laughed. Not a happy laugh. A bitter one. "Survive? Maybe. This is still a safe Democratic district. She's got name recognition. She's got institutional support. She might win the primary, might keep her seat." She paused. "But survive with her credibility intact? With people still believing she fights for us? With her reputation as anti-Maxine, the fearless fighter? That's gone. That died in that hearing room. We all watched it die in real time." "Do you think Bongino was right when he called her a poverty pimp?" She was quiet for a long time, staring into her coffee cup like the answer might be written in the foam. "I was so mad when he said that. So mad. I was ready to defend her, ready to call it racist, call it sexist, call it whatever. I needed to call it to protect her." Another long pause. But then I went home, and I walked through my neighborhood, and I looked at the homeless camps, and I looked at the closed stores, and I looked at the schools, and I thought about her mansion, and her daughter's $1 million, and her husband's bank deals, and 32 years of nothing changing except her getting richer. She looked up at me, and I realized he had a point. Maybe he said it harsh. Maybe he was wrong about some things. But the basic accusation that she built her wealth on our poverty, that she uses our struggles for her benefit, that she doesn't actually fight for us, she just talks about fighting for us. She nodded slowly. Yeah, he had a point. And I hate that he was right. I hate that it took a Trump guy to say it. I hate that it took a Republican hearing to expose it. But it needed to be said. Someone needed to say it. We just couldn't say it ourselves. We were too loyal, too committed to the fight, too scared of helping the other side. What happens now? Now? She laughed again. Now we have to rebuild. We have to find new leadership. We have to run someone who actually lives here, who actually knows these streets, who actually gives a damn about something other than keeping their seat and making their money. She stood up to leave. Maxine Waters had 32 years to prove she cared about us. She proved something else instead. Now it's someone else's turn. 6 months after the hearing, the political landscape in California's 43rd District had completely transformed. Marcus Williams, the 34-year-old community organizer, had turned his long-shot primary challenge into a serious campaign. He'd raised over $2 million, mostly in small dollar donations, $5, $10, $20, from people in the district who'd never donated to a political campaign before. but were angry enough to open their wallets. His message was simple and devastating. I'm not running against Maxine Waters the person. I'm running against what she represents. 32 years in office, $6 million in wealth, a mansion outside the district, family members on the payroll. And what do we have to show for it? Higher poverty, worse schools, more homelessness, more crime. It's time for real representation. It's time for someone who lives here, who knows these streets, who actually fights for us instead of just talking about it. He held town halls every week, in parks, in community centers, in churches, anywhere people would gather. And unlike Waters, he actually showed up. He didn't send surrogates. He came himself, answered questions, listened to complaints, made promises he might not be able to keep, but at least showed he was trying. Waters' approval rating in her own district had cratered to 31%, in a district she'd won with 71% in the last election. The collapse was unprecedented. She still gave interviews, still insisted this was all a right-wing conspiracy, still blamed racism and sexism and Republican attacks, but fewer and fewer people were listening. Because you can't dismiss property records as conspiracy theories. You can't call campaign finance filings racist. You can't accuse public records of being sexist. The facts were just facts. And the facts made her look like exactly what Bongino had called her. Someone who'd gotten rich while her constituents stayed poor. Someone who lived in luxury while representing poverty. Someone who talked about fighting for the people, but fought hardest for her own bank account. The ethics investigation was ongoing, slow, methodical. They were reviewing decades of financial disclosures, examining property transactions, analyzing committee votes, interviewing former staffers. It would take months more, maybe years, but the political verdict had already been delivered in that hearing room at 2:34 p.m. on a Tuesday in March. When Dan Bongino pulled back the curtain and showed everyone what was really there. Not a champion of the poor, not a fighter for justice, not Auntie Maxine looking out for her people, just another politician, another career office holder who'd figured out how to game the system. How to live richly while representing the poor, how to talk about fighting corruption while engaging in the legal kind. The kind that doesn't get you indicted, but should get you voted out. Dan Bongino gave a speech at a law enforcement conference in Atlanta 6 months after the hearing. Someone asked him about the Waters confrontation, about the controversy, about the accusations that he'd gone too far, been too personal, crossed too many lines. He thought for a moment before answering. Look, I'm not proud of using the term poverty pimp. In hindsight, it was harsh. Could have made my point without that specific phrase, but I'm not going to apologize for the substance, because it was true. He leaned forward against the podium. Maxine Waters called that hearing. She subpoenaed me. She wanted to impeach FBI leadership. She wanted to expose us as Trump loyalists targeting black activists. Fine, that's her right. But if you're going to question my integrity, if you're going to attack my credibility, if you're going to try to destroy my career on national television, then I'm going to defend myself, and I'm going to do it with facts. Someone in the audience raised a hand. But wasn't it inappropriate to bring up her personal finances in a hearing that was supposed to be about FBI practices? She made it personal first. She attacked my background, my past political statements, my fitness for office. She tried to delegitimize me as a Trump operative who had no business wearing an FBI badge. He shrugged. So I responded with facts about her record, her wealth, her properties, her family's banking connection, her campaign payments to her daughter, her absence from her own district. The gap between her rhetoric and her reality. All public information. All documented. All verifiable. Another question. Do you think you ended her career? Bongino shook his head. I didn't end her career. She ended her own career by living in a mansion while representing poverty, by getting rich while her constituents stayed poor, by spending 32 years talking about fighting for the little guy while actually fighting for her bank account. I just held up the mirror. She didn't like what she saw. That's not my fault. He straightened up. Here's what people don't understand about corruption. It's not always illegal. Sometimes it's perfectly legal to use campaign funds to pay your family members. Sometimes it's legal to live in a mansion while representing a poor district. Sometimes it's legal to sit on a committee that regulates industries your family profits from. Sometimes it's legal to vote in ways that benefit your personal financial interests. He paused. But legal doesn't mean right. Legal doesn't mean ethical. Legal doesn't mean you're actually representing your constituents instead of exploiting them. Maxine Waters spent 32 years doing legal things that made her a millionaire while her voters stayed poor. And when someone finally called her out on it publicly, with evidence, she had no answer. Just accusations, just deflections, just playing the race card and hoping it would work like it always had before. He gathered his notes. The job of law enforcement, whether it's the FBI or local police or anyone else, is to investigate crimes. But sometimes the biggest harm comes from things that aren't technically crimes, from people who use the system exactly as it's designed to enrich themselves while claiming to fight for others. That's not illegal, but it damn sure ain't right. He walked off stage to scattered applause, some supportive, some skeptical, most just processing what they'd heard. It's been nearly a year now since that hearing. The political world has moved on to new scandals, new outrages, new crises. That's how it works. The news cycle is relentless and unforgiving. But in South Los Angeles, in Watts, in Inglewood, in the neighborhoods that make up California's 43rd Congressional District, something fundamental changed that day. People started asking questions. Questions they should have been asking for years, but hadn't. Because of loyalty, because of party, because of identity, because it felt like betraying the cause. Where does Maxine live? Why doesn't she live here? How did she get $6 million? Why is her daughter getting campaign money? When was the last time she actually spent time in this community? Why haven't things gotten better after 32 years? The primary is in 2 months. Current polling has Waters trailing Marcus Williams by 14 points. 14 points. In her own district. After 3 decades, she might close that gap. Name recognition matters. Money matters. Institutional endorsements matter. She's got all of those things. But she doesn't have credibility anymore. She doesn't have moral authority. She doesn't have the ability to stand in front of cameras and demand justice for the poor when everyone knows she lives in a $6 million mansion far from the poverty she claims to fight. That image is permanent now, burned into the public consciousness, the split screen, the mansion and the tent cities, 32 years of representation. One side living in luxury, the other sleeping on concrete. As for Dan Bongino, he's still FBI Deputy Director, still doing the job, still investigating cases. He doesn't give interviews about the Waters hearing, doesn't tweet about it, doesn't do victory laps on his podcast. He's moved on, because to him, it was never personal. It was never about destroying Maxine Waters specifically. It was about exposing a type of corruption that's perfectly legal but morally bankrupt. The kind where politicians claim to represent the poor while living like the rich, where they demand accountability from others while dodging it themselves, where they preach sacrifice while practicing enrichment. He didn't invent that contradiction. It existed long before that hearing. It'll exist long after. But he forced everyone to look at it directly, without filters, without spin, without the protective layers of party loyalty or identity politics or fear of being called racist. Just the facts, just the truth, just the undeniable reality of a representative who got rich while her constituents stayed poor. And Maxine Waters? She'll probably survive. Politicians usually do. She might win her primary, might keep her seat, might serve another term or two, but she'll never recover what she lost that day. The credibility, the moral authority, the ability to stand before cameras and demand justice for the poor when everyone knows she lives in a $6 million mansion. That died at 2:34 p.m. in front of 47 million viewers when the curtain got pulled back and everyone saw what was really there. Not a champion, not a fighter, not anti-Maxine protecting her community, just another politician who figured out how to work the system, how to talk about fighting poverty while getting rich, how to claim to represent the voiceless while ignoring their voices, how to build an empire on public service while providing very little actual service to the public. It's not illegal, but it's not right either. And sometimes, just sometimes, someone points that out in a way that can't be ignored. That's what happened on March 17, 2025. The day Maxine Waters called a hearing to destroy an FBI official and ended up destroying herself instead.